Hey guys, and welcome to Betwixt the Books. Today we are going to be discussing a trend that we have noticed recently in publishing, that has to do specifically with editing, and that is editing just in general. We're going to be talking about a couple of things that we've noticed in books that we've read recently, as well as just some of our own personal opinions on editing in general, probably because that's what we normally do, because even though we're not in the industry at all, we have opinions.
Oh, we read a lot of books, okay?
I'm technically a bookseller. Is that in the industry?
I have a degree in librarianing.
Very much have a lot to say about writing and editing novels.
I do think though that it is fair for us to add that. I mean, you talked about this last time. You are currently writing fan fiction. I have written several novels. I have an undergraduate degree in writing. Michaela and I partially became friends, not only because we liked books, but because we were also writers. So we can joke about it, but we are people who have thought for many, many years very critically about writing so that we could improve ourselves. So, I think that's fair. I
also can say that I was the editor-in-chief of a literary magazine for 2 years. So I have editing experience. I do that. And I feel like personally, if somebody was to ask me what kind of a reader I am, oftentimes I say I am like an editing reader. Like my brain is constantly thinking of how to better structure, or how to improve a book constantly. And I don't know if that's just because that's how I review books, or if that's just how my brain works. Like I want to take these puzzle pieces and make the most beautiful art that I can out of it.
And I think that's part of the reason we started this channel. Originally it was a book club channel, but I think all 4 of us, and then 3 of us, and now 2 of us, just enjoy dissecting a book and saying what worked and what didn't work, and why, I think has always just been really critical for us. So, it's all there. Obviously we're not editors and we're not in the business, but I think, especially in what we're talking about today, we have feelings. And I think you were being very kind when you called it a trend that we've noticed lately, and not how I phrased it before we started recording, which was bad, because we were both very recently disappointed by 2 different authors that we each individually hold in fairly high esteem. So that's what inspired this, because I cannot bring myself to do a review of the book I'm going to talk about, because it will just hurt me too much.
And I am debating doing a video with the book that I'm probably going to discuss a fair amount in detail today, not maybe by itself. I might do a couple other things in with that video, because I don't think I have enough thoughts to make it its own full review. And also it's been almost a year since I read that book now, so it feels like I don't feel like I can do an accurate review at this point that's a complete holistic review of just this book. But even still, if you've watched several of our joint reviews, you will probably find us a fair amount of the time talking about I feel like this part was unnecessary and could have been cut out, or I feel like there was a better trajectory this could have gone using the tropes that were a part of this book. There's an obvious ending that it would have made way more sense and been more satisfying than it would have been than the actual ending we got. Conversations like that, where we're talking about the structure of a book more holistically. We're not talking so much about copy edits. All of us have read a book and been like, typo, mistake, I caught it. Those types of things happen. Books are long. It's easy to be missed.
Also, Michaela and I read a lot of KU, which is just sometimes you have to be okay with a few it's okay story, but someone could have edited that better. We're not talking about that.
And I mentioned before we started recording, I am way more forgiving of this in a KU book, because it's usually a self-published or indie pubbed author who may not have been able to afford even a freelance editor, let alone a fully like in the industry editor. But when it comes to traditionally published books, they have an editor who has a salary from the company that is publishing this book. And sometimes multiple people look at that, like a copy editor and an actual editor. Also, their agent may look at it and talk about stuff. Like there's people who can intercede here.
Yeah. And I mean, you can say also that, I don't know, maybe if it's a debut author, for example, and they haven't put a lot of resources behind it, you know, maybe the editor that they have is new, or
a junior editor.
Yeah. Or, you know, it's the first time they've worked with this editor and their relationship isn't really established. But the two books that we're specifically talking about today are by long established authors who have a significant back catalog, who are really popular. And so I would assume that they are getting top tier, you know, and just they know better.
Yeah, they should know better.
They should. Maybe I have faith I shouldn't have, but anyway. Do you want to talk about yours first?
Yeah, I can talk about mine. So this is A Terrible Fall of Angels by Laurel K Hamilton. If you recognize that author, she writes the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series as well as the Mercy Gentry series. I don't think that one has like a subtitle, but this is the first book in a new series, the Zaniel Havelock series. It's her first series with a male protagonist. This one follows a police officer who specializes in talking with angels. The beginning of this book is there is a angel feather found at the crime scene of a very like not angelic looking crime. So they're confused about why that's there, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. But obviously Laurel K Hamilton, Anita Blake on its own is almost 30 books long. Mary Gentry is almost 10 books long, and this is like the first book in a new series. So that's a lot of books to have written. They're often quite long. It's urban fantasy, so she's definitely got a lot of writing experience under her belt. I do know when it comes to Laurel K Hamilton that her longtime editor retired, and a couple of books back, she got a new editor. So when the first couple of Anita Blake books that came out with that new editor came out, it was a little bit rough in the same way that I'm going to talk about this one. And I was like, oh, maybe she's just like finding her groove with this new editor. Like maybe it's just like the editor's a bit intimidated because this is a huge author, especially probably for the company. They probably make a fair amount of money off of Laurel K Hamilton's books. When an urban fantasy book comes out in hardcover, that's rare. Like these are like normally like mass market paperback books, right? So you know that this is an author that they're putting some money behind. But it has continued past like 3, 4, 5 books with this new editor. And again, I'm not going to say that she's a bad editor because this wasn't a bad book by any means, but there was a couple of things in here specifically structurally that I, as a reader, feel like an editor should have stepped in and said, hey, do we really need this scene? The most egregious of which I can give an example of, there is a point in this book where Zaniel goes to couples therapy with his wife, who he is separated from. And there is a prolonged scene where they are arguing. It's couples therapy. That makes sense. After that scene, they leave the therapist's office. The wife pulls up in the parking lot, blocks his car in, and they continue to have the same argument in the parking lot in a separate scene. Me as a reader, I'm like, why am I seeing this argument again? We just had this argument. Like what is happening? If the only, like, what is this scene doing for the book? When we talk about having scenes, like you want them to move the plot forward, give you character information, set a tone, like they should be doing something in the course of the novel. Like they have a purpose. They aren't just there to just be there and pad it, I guess. Like, or I don't feel like we should have just padding scenes. That doesn't make a good book. So when I was reading the scene, I'm sitting here like, is it just to up her crazy a little bit because she's blocking him in and like forcing him to have this confrontation? But nothing new was in the conversation. There weren't any new arguments, any new ideas really. And there are other ways that could have been done that would have more benefited other parts of the narrative, I feel like. So like here's a very like exact example where I feel like an editor could have been like, do we need 2 separate scenes, or could this have been one scene? Like, could we just cut out this scene altogether? Or do something else? Can we add something else? Like, what else could this be doing? And I feel like that is a job of an editor, to go to the author, because the author, even as I know, as I'm writing, I'm just writing stuff down. Like, I'm continuing, and like those characters might be thinking about those things and having that conversation, having just had it again. Like, I get it. But if a finished published book from a big publisher, like, I feel like it is a little sloppy, it's a little loose. Why is this in here?
So the book that I am going to talk about, I won't go into as much detail in the plot, I promise, because it's the second book in a series, not the first one like Michaela had, but I have Sarah J. Maas's new book in the Crescent City series, House of Sky and Breath. Now, I'm not going to rehash the review of the first book in this series that Michaela and I did. We both read the first book and did a joint review. You can go watch that if you want. But we had two major complaints. And the first was that the first 100 pages felt very unnecessary. And that for me in particular, there was this moment where there was an instance of author intervention. And what that means, specifically in this case, is that these books are told by rotating points of view, and you then see for that chapter, you know, the view through that, their thoughts, their feelings, and their views on everything that is happening. And so there was one character who, for, you know, this book had some of the main POV chapters. And then there was this like gotcha moment where we find out that in fact he's been planning on betraying some other character all along. And they've talked about this, you know, there's been scenes where they've talked to this character and like they've never thought it. And so, you know, in that moment that Sarah J. Maas as the author has hidden that from you, because as a normal person, if you're planning on betraying your friend, like you would be thinking about that in that conversation, right? Or at least one of them. That wouldn't be hidden. It was really upsetting to me because if you don't know, I have a line from one of Sarah's series on the shoulder. I have a line from Throne of Glass there. And so that was really upsetting, but I was willing to give this series a shot because I know that this is her trying to do something different. It's definitely, I would say, the most involved fantasy world that she's written. From the beginning, I think things like the Throne of Glass series got more complicated as it went along, but this one was like a very clear, there's a larger cast of characters than from the beginning than have been in her other series. So it's just her trying to do, I think, another level of a couple of things at once.
A bit more ambitious of a novel.
Yeah. And so I don't like really high fantasy to begin with. A lot of world building really slows books down for me. That's just not something that I enjoy. So when these books have a lot of that, that's something I recognize as something that I just don't like. It's not a fault of the book. That's my personal opinion. But I was going into this book and I'm just like, I'm texting Michaela and I'm like, this is so slow again. Why? And I'm like there were characters that were clearly in the first book that I didn't even remember at all. And so I'm like, oh, this is so bad. But after about like 100 pages in, the book started to pick up a little bit more. And I was like, okay, this is better. And Michaela's like, no, that's too long. And I was like, I mean, it is. But I mean, this book is 800, 900 pages long.
Doesn't need to be that long.
But then something worse happens. Which is, and this is mildly spoilery, and I'm sorry. But in the vaguest terms possible, you find out that the thing they've been doing this entire time has actually just been 500 pages of side quest. And the main character knew the answer the entire time. But in not one of their POV chapters was that revealed until like 200 pages before the end.
Oh, thank
And
you.
so finding out that everything that I'd been putting up with really was just side quest. And not only was it side quest, but it was unnecessary side quest, basically just to level up some characters before the final battle. I have 100 pages left. I still haven't finished it. I just put it down in just absolute despair. Like, I was talking to Michaela and I was like, my soul literally hurts because it's the same exact thing. It's that author intervention gotcha moment that is supposed to feel like this big reveal, but really I just feel as a reader betrayed. And it's the second book in a row where this has happened. And I am upset.
And again, as an editor, if I was reading this as a manuscript, I would have turned around and been like, we've been in this character's head and not once did they think about this. Especially when they're interacting with that idea. Like, there's one thing for that character to never have been questioned or be doing anything involving that, and then they have the answer, right? Like, oh, you guys should have just talked to this other guy because he knew the answer the whole time. No, it is the POV character who is engaging with this the whole time and then goes, wait a second, I know what was going on the whole time. What are you talking about?
So one of the things that I think both me and Michaela's experiences really brought home to us was just that, like, these are both authors that we have seen do better. And so what in this particular instance, because it's not, no first draft is perfect, right? No author is perfect. And every book that you read is often the product of multiple hands of people helping the author craft their original manuscript into something, something better, helping to sharpen it or stuff like that. And so, like Michaela said, there was a very clear editor switch for Laurel K Hamilton. Michaela and I tried to look up editors for Sarah J. Maas, and it does seem like there was a switch, but it was like longer ago. And so I was starting to talk about, I think part of the problem here is, I really liked how you phrased this before we recorded this. So I'm going to say it, and but this is total Michaela credit of, it's a cash cow they've turned into a workhorse. And so Sarah J. Maas's best books were the ones that she had time to work on and to give that time to. She's now publishing 2 series at the same time, back and forth. They're 2 different worlds. They're, bigger fantasy books. And in the last couple of years, there's been a pandemic and she's had a couple of kids. And she's still working on this incredible schedule. And I think, Bloomsbury restructured its entire financial structure to put her at the head of it. Like, that's how much money they have behind her. So if she is not producing for them, there is a huge portion of their income that is not generating profit. And so I wouldn't be surprised if she, whether self-inflicted or not, feels that pressure. But I do think that her books have gotten, not like this one might be unreadable, but have gone downhill the faster she's been asked to produce them. And it's sad.
Yeah. Now, this isn't an issue for Laurel K Hamilton. I know, because Laurel K Hamilton used to put out 2 books a year, and she's actually downscaled her writing to only doing 1 book a year. So I know that the issue here was not a speed thing of like the publisher pressuring for more content to be put out. I'm pretty sure that she's still probably one of their bigger authors, but I don't think that that's what the issue was here. And then I can pretty much pinpoint that the changes in the books that I have read comes from a change in the editor, which is why it's like part of this discussion. But this, and it's not just these 2 authors, like we have seen more books coming out where we feel like a little bit more time. Like if somebody, like one more pass, like one more draft, where if somebody just took a little bit more time with some of these books. And I don't know if this is an issue in the industry. I know that, like, as somebody who works in bookselling, that there's like paper shortages and things going on. I have never, like, I started working in bookselling in 2016. I left for a couple years and I came back. In the last 2 years, the number of times where we like cannot get stock in books, like we just like, people want them and I can't order them. We have none in the warehouse. We're waiting on the publisher to publish more. There's a book that I pre-ordered that was supposed to come out last year that has been pushed fully a year. Done manuscript. It's not that the manuscript needs to get worked on. It's just that they can't print the copies. They keep pushing it. And like, I don't know what's going on. It's a little bit spooky and scary to see this sorts of stuff. Like, it's not great. But like, I also feel like there's like a downhill in quality happening. And I don't know where the exact pinpoint problem is. These are clearly editing issues. Like, do we take the extra month, 2 months to do another pass on this book, or do we just publish it and get it out? Like, what is happening?
Well, and I mean, I think, you know, with these two, there's clearly name recognition. Like, you know,
Yes.
that if you can get this out, it will sell.
Yes.
And there's enough of at this point, there's not been enough bad books to outweigh the, like, I still feel like, okay, Sarah J. Maas will put out another book and it will be better. And I believe that. And I wonder also for other people, they maybe have less name recognition. But for example, right now, Heartstopper is really big. And so any manuscript that anyone has their hands on that feels like Heartstopper, they'll push to the front, right? And they'll say, get this out as fast as you can, because if we can get this debut or this, you know, less well-known author out on the coattails of this trend, you know,
maybe it'll work.
But I mean, I don't know. I still feel like there was times, like, obviously, like Twilight came out, right? And there was all those vampire books, and the Hunger Games came out, and there were all those dystopian books.
Yes.
And I still feel like, and I don't know if it was because at the time those trends lasted longer.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't think I felt
the vampire trend was like fully a year, 2 years, like 3
Yeah.
years, maybe more. The dystopian trend was like almost a decade. I feel like there was like a very long.
I'm pretty sure I have like a blog post or something where I'm like, I'm sick and friggin' tired of this dystopian books.
Yes.
Can I read anything else? I'm so bored.
Hey.
Oh, I was gonna say something too and I forgot what it was.
I'm sorry.
No. Oh no, but I was also thinking about, like, I remember when I feel like it was maybe Cassandra Clare that was the first author where I saw them doing the back and forth thing as well. I feel like up until that point, I was only really aware of an author releasing one series at a time. And I want to be clear that there are some people who they might want that space, right? So they want to write 2 series because they need distance from the series like that. There are also authors that can write quality quickly.
Yeah.
I want to just say that this is not a blanket statement.
No.
But it's just something that does happen. So I just want to make that clear. But I do think sometimes that's a problem as well.
There's an interesting thing where I feel like, depending on how quickly authors are working, if they're doing 2 distinctly different series, sometimes they start blending a little bit. Laurel K Hamilton, actually, I don't know if it was a blog post that she posted or a TikTok that she did, because she's on TikTok, where she was talking about how she was writing one book and she realized that the scene that she was writing was for her other series. like she had imposed characters in the wrong, like she was like, this doesn't feel right. Like, why am I writing? Oh, this is like an Anita scene. Like, why am I writing this? So I could totally see that being an issue for some authors, like keeping their worlds straight. Especially if you're, that's different. That feels intentional. No.
People who have finished this book, because I did spoil the last page for myself accidentally. People who have finished this will know what this space means, but I am upset.
Yes.
Anyway, Sorry.
No.
You said that and I just
Yeah.
got like the rage just filled me all over again.
But again, that's intentional. And like that, I have seen that happen where like a tone shift feels weird or like something like there's some things. And again, a good editor will see that and catch it and be like, let's maybe do something better with this. We've been talking a lot on the last couple of joint reviews that we did about pacing being an issue that we're noticing. And again, that could, editors come into these books and be like, hey, the first half of your novel feels like it's 300 pages, even though it's only 150. And the last 20 pages really should be probably 100 pages. Can we reallocate some space?
Yeah. And if you want a really good example of that, I mean, Iron Widow, which we both just read, was a crazy example of that. I read it. I finished it prior to Michaela, and Michaela was like, I'm having trouble with the beginning. And I was like, just wait till the beginning is gone, because all of a sudden that train has no brakes. Everything.
Like literally to the second to last page. What the fuck?
And that's another thing where I'm like tons of people read this. Like that publisher put a lot of money behind that book. Like they clearly wanted it to be a big thing. Why? I ask you.
And to be fair, Iron Widow is a debut. Like again, like we will give, like, maybe they didn't realize how big it was initially and then they decided to get behind it. Shiran J. Zhao obviously has a YouTube channel that blew up last year. I think 2 years ago, maybe. She did like a discussion on the new Mulan movie when that came out, the live action Mulan, because she's from China, and she was talking about like that, and she like does that for media that has Asian influences, specifically Chinese influences. She goes down and breaks it down. But anyway, so this was her first book, and she was saying how she had a hard time selling it, and then she sold it to the smaller publisher in Canada. So again, it's not like a huge, it wasn't like a big three publisher, like it was like a smaller house. Again, giving all of the best things, but like a really good editor. Like I feel like we need to get some more backing behind some really good editors, and maybe some discussions on changes to timelines as well in the industry.
Well, like, and I will say, and I mean, we do not have time for this, but I just want to say really quickly that for a really long time, the industry of publishing has been the purview of mostly white men who have money and time on their hands. Publishing as an industry for a really long time was known as an industry that did not make money. The purpose of it was not to make money, which meant that people were very invested in the quality of the literature. But unfortunately, what that meant is that you couldn't do publishing unless you already had money. And again, that's where you get a lot of really white men. And Lee and Low is a publishing company that specializes in diverse titles, but they also do an industry report about how white and non-diverse in other ways the industry still is. Movements like We Need Diverse Books have had an impact, but we're nowhere near continental shift that we really need. And also, as with every other industry, the pandemic has caused I mean, I have several friends who work in publishing. I got my master's at Simmons University, and that sends a lot of people into publishing. And I'm pretty sure half of them have changed jobs. So like, you know, like many industries, I'm sure it's struggling right now. So there is that. But I mean, we don't have time.
No, and again, I could probably do a whole discussion where I talk about like book selling and how trends are shifting. Like hardcover sales are down across the board, which is a problem for publishing because that's where they make the bulk of their money, usually is in hardcover sales. Things that are up, backlist sales, great, thanks TikTok. But nobody can figure out how to use TikTok to drive sales. They only can react to TikTok. So not effective for marketing. Just out there.
And I mean, just one last thing to this conversation is in a more fast-paced, stressful situation, I can also imagine that it is it is causing author stress as well. And so the quality of the original manuscript that you turn in and potentially your level of inspiration or even excitement will go down the more stress that you're put on. This is an old example now, but I remember when Stephanie Perkins released Anna and the French Kiss, which was a YA contemporary from a while ago. It had a 10-year anniversary edition put out a couple of years ago, which I bought. So that's how old it is. And because that book was so successful, she was pushed into putting out the second book really fast. And that book, it came out and there was going to be a third one. And eventually Stephanie Perkins came out online and said, listen, my mental health has deteriorated into like nothingness. I'm taking a break. This entire process, like, I'm glad you loved Anna and the French Kiss. I hope you loved Lola, but I did not enjoy writing that book. And my mental health has tanked. So I'm going to take time and then I'm going to give you the third book. And eventually Isla came out. There was a gap, but Isla is definitely Isla and the Happily Ever After is the full title, and it is definitely better than Lola and the Boy Next Door. Lola and the Boy Next Door is not a bad book. No. But I think you can, even if I couldn't point to something and say, it's there, like, there's a difference.
You can feel it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd hate for us to get to a point where they're trying to move so quickly that an author is not enjoying writing a book that we then don't enjoy reading.
Yeah, you can feel it, and that's not helpful to anybody. Like, it doesn't feel good as the reader, it doesn't feel good as the writer, and then it, like, you have to like look at the publisher and be like, I realize that you are a business and you are trying to make money, but like at the same time
well, and it sounds like, I mean, that's what Laurel K Hamilton got to a point where she was like, I'm powerful enough now
to say
to you. Or you go like the James Patterson model where you don't write your own books anymore.
You get a bunch of ghostwriters.
Which
at least speaking of James Patterson, if anybody hasn't seen that news article that he put out where he talked about how there's so few opportunities for middle-aged white men in publishing now, please go have a laugh, because friends, let me tell you something. You don't know how wrong you are. The ideal.
That, coupled with the recent release of like the cover of his memoir that he's putting out,
James Patterson. It's out. James Patterson by James Patterson is out. Yes, it's it came out last week.
That is a thing that exists in this world. Let me tell you.
Loves himself.
I mean, at least get classy, like Danielle Steele, who like has a picture of her in a ball gown in repose on like a chaise lounge with like a portrait of herself in the background. And you're like, I mean, you know what? Mad respect. You just went for it. James Patterson literally just puts like his face like this on the book cover. And he's like, hey guys.
Very close up.
So close.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. I think that's our discussion. Also, if you would like to hire me as an editor, I will I will edit your stuff. I promise. I am one of those scary editors that gives you a lot of notes. People hated me in college, but also loved me because they would get their papers back covered in notes. And then they would be like, never mind, this was terrifying, but also I think I've never written a better essay. You're welcome.
I mean, I always just remember going, I don't have to edit jack. I'm just going to hand it to Michaela and I'll deal with it later.
String of comments down the sides, just string of comments.
Even spell check. I've just been like, it's pointless for me to look at it. You just deal with it and give it back to me. It's great.
I will kill your darlings. I will kill them so dead. You get nothing.
And I mean, it's an emotional thing and it's hard. And there is also no one size fits all. And like a book that we say is poorly edited, like someone else can really enjoy, right? This is all subjective. But if this is a continuing trend in publishing, and like I said, Like, I don't want authors to be stressed out. I don't want editors to be stressed out. And as a reader, I want to read a book that is a good book that someone enjoyed putting together.
Yeah.
Like, I just, at a certain point, it moves too fast. And I sound like my parents, and I don't even care. These days move so fast.
I would like to say, just because I was like kind of mean to this book, this is a 4-star book for me. Like, I do not want people to like not pick up this book series, because I read this and I was like, it's okay. I have not stopped thinking about this series since I put the book down, and her next book is an Anita Blake book, so I don't know how long I'm going to be waiting for the next book in his annual series, or if there even is going to be one. I don't know what the sales were like on this book. I will recommend it. I'm just letting you know that I noticed the editing thing in this, and that's why I used it as a reference. Whereas I don't think Gretchen recommends that series, either of them. I know, like, I read the first book, but just listening to her talk about the second book, I know that I'm not going to pick it up unless I'm like really desperate and like want to.
I mean, there are books that I don't necessarily enjoy reading them, but I will go to Michaela and I will say, listen, will you read this?
Yeah.
Because I think there is merit to discussing it, right? Yeah. I mean, but I remembered I was telling Michaela about this book, and she was like, well, so do you want me to read it so we can like do a review? And I said, no, I would never do that to you. And I think that's the like part of what is just so destroying to me as someone who really likes Sarah J. Maas. I like to think that, you know, you can really like an author and still be able to critically read their books. And so like, I know that she's not perfect. I would not say that every single one of her books is like a perfect 5-star read. And I respect the issues that people have had with her with things like LGBTQ issues and stuff like that. I'm fully aware of that, but I do have a certain expectation for a level of her books.
And it didn't meet it.
It didn't meet it. It didn't meet it.
And that's sad, because that series is like, if you were going to sell me a Sarah J. Maas series based on what I like in reading and like the genres I tend to read, it would have been that series, but no. No. One of the authors at an author event that I hosted at my store was like, I was talking about how I was moving out of YA as a reader. Like, it's a lot harder for me to love a YA book. Like, I read them still and I do enjoy them, but there's like very rarely are they ever going to be a 5-star read at this point. She's like, well, Sarah J. Maas has adult books, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't think as many people, like, with the exception of maybe the second book in the Court series, right? It's the second one that people really like. I don't like the idea of having to read a book before you can read the good book, though. That's not ideal to me.
Okay, this is not a part of this discussion, but like, it's the second book is only that good because of the first book. They are inextricably linked.
Yeah. Heart. I may read them someday. I don't know. I may, but
I mean, again, the last book, not as good. But you can read the first 3 and then close the door. You don't have to keep going.
Done.
Anyway.
That's what it is. Anyway,
but
that's our discussion on editing.
I feel like doing like Sophie Turner, like, and that's the tea.
Ragging on an industry when we aren't even in the industry. Again.
No, I mean, you know, we're just people who love books and love authors and feel passionately about not just good books, but a good industry.
Yeah. I think that's important to say.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. That's all I've got.
All right, guys, we're gonna stop just prattling because we can, turn off the recording and prattle some more at each other. But thank you so much if you're still here at the end. If you have thoughts, feelings, comments, a series where you've noticed the quality going downhill, or one where the quality has gone uphill, let's talk about that. We can do positivity. We definitely feel positive feelings sometimes. Anyway, we recently did a joint review of Katie Roberts' latest Dark Olympus book, which is right there. It is Wicked Beauty. You can check that out for our latest review content. Otherwise, we are hoping to read and review Heartstopper, a graphic novel that is all the rage right now, but will be interesting because I don't read a lot of graphic novels and Michaela reads a lot of them. And so it's always a really excellent discussion of like what we value as different readers going into those. So check back out for that soon, and we'll see you then. All right, bye.